Number 7 gives us some sets of inequalities, and we have to determine which one is correct. You can do this by graphing them in your calculator, but when you do, you'll notice that all of these equations are the same exact thing. The only difference are these signs in the middle, okay, the actual inequalities themselves. So the first thing I do is I look at what kind of line do we have. These are all solid lines, okay? They're all solid. Well, that means they have a greater than or equal to or a less than or equal. Sorry, this would actually be less than, but said those backwards. They would all be a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. Well, that takes A and B and marks them out because these are just regular greater than and less than symbols. Now I look down at C and D. They have the right signs when it comes to solid lines, but they're backwards. So we have to determine which equation is which. Well, y equals x would just be a line with an intercept of 0 and a slope of 1. That's right there. Now we have to just decide about the shading. Y is greater than x means we shade above that line. So here's this line we were looking at. Y is greater than or equal to x. We shade above it. Well, that checks out so far. Our second line, this is less than or equal to, so we would shade below it. And this is that line because it's got an intercept of 4, a y-intercept of 4, and a slope of 1. So we want to shade below this. So this one looks correct. Let's look at the last one just to be safe. Our D answer says y is less than or equal to x. That would be shading down here below this line, so that is not our answer. Our answer should have been C. Okay? Answer should have been C. Number 8, this is about the best way I can get it to fit on this screen. I apologize for that. It's kind of a really, really long problem. So he owns 2 hardware stores. These scatter plots show the number of items sold at specific prices for each week. If he wants to sell a new type of hammer for $30, at which store should he sell the hammer? Okay, so the thing is, we're looking at price of the item, and so he wants to sell something at $30. He wants to know which one should he sell it at. Well, if I look here at 30, in this first store, he's really only selling about 20 of these at 30, somewhere in that range. Whereas in his first store, if he's selling 30 of them, he's somewhere way up here because this little regression line is up here higher. So this first store is going to sell a lot more than that second store. Okay, so you've just got to take this in terms of a real world problem. So I would want to sell it at store number 1. That gets rid of A and that gets rid of D. So here's your 2 answers. Store 1, this store makes more money. Or store 1, Mike sells more $30 items at this store, okay? You can't inherently say one store makes more money than the other because look, this one eventually starts making a lot of money with these more expensive items. What this boils down to is store 1 sells a lot more cheap items, sells a lot bigger bulk of these cheap items, but it doesn't sell as many of the expensive ones. Store 2 might be a higher end store. It doesn't sell many cheap little items, but it sells a lot of these big expensive ones. So the reason you want to choose store 1 is not because it makes more money. It's because he sells more of those low-cost items. That's the tricky part to me of that problem, is the reasoning, okay? But even if you could just get down to store 1, you've got a 50-50 shot, and that's better than a 1 in 4 shot, okay? So use your test-taking skills. Number 9, this one's pretty simple. Which scatter plots have a positive correlation, okay? That means the data trends upwards. As X increases, Y increases. Well, I see that this one has a positive correlation. A also has a positive correlation. B, we can't tell. We have no idea, so we're not looking for B. D actually has a negative correlation. Correlation just means that slope, okay? So D didn't work, B didn't work. What we're looking for is A and C, plots A and C. Be careful to check all the things given to you. Number 10, find f of negative 2. Well, what f of negative 2 is everywhere we had an x, we're now plugging in a negative 2. Be careful. Notice how I just wrote this. Negative 2 in the parentheses. Everywhere I plug in a number, I always put it into parentheses. Does it always matter? No, but rather safe than sorry. From here out, it's a calculator problem. 9 times negative 2 squared minus 5 times negative 2 plus 2. When I hammer all that out, I get positive 48, which would be answer D. 11, graph of f of x equals x is given. Which equation would translate the graph 3 units down? Okay. First off, if you know your definitions, this is a quick problem. Okay. You know that down 3 units means you tack on a minus 3 at the very end. If you're not good with those definitions, it's okay because you can test this in the calculator. Okay. My original equation was just y equals x. My new equation that I think it is, now you could start right here, test it, test it, test it. Eventually you would get down to this third option C and type in x minus 3. Now when I hit graph, the first line that pops up is my starting equation. Whichever order you type them in is the order we'll graph them in. Then we want to see, did this new option C translate down 3 units? So I press graph. There's my original, and I want my new one to be down 3 units, and it is. So that shores things up that this would be option C. Number 12, describe the correlation, okay? Well, I see that this goes up, so I'm looking for anything that says positive. Honestly, this threw me off for a loop for a second because when I think describe the correlation, I think that there should be another word, maybe strong or weak out here, but that doesn't show up down here. No correlation? Well, no, it definitely has correlation. You can tell it's positive. Again, you can tell it's positive. Now we're left with prime correlation and positive correlation. I don't know what prime is. Not seen that one. But I know what positive is. And this is indeed positive correlation. So I would call it positive correlation. 13, analyze the data represented in the graph. Select the appropriate model. Okay? So this is one of those ones where you've got to kind of look at and decide, hey, what does that curve look like? Some people want to call it quadratic because they see this. Okay, but look, there are so many crazy points way off from that. Okay, don't overthink this. When you look at this, this is what we call just a cloud of data. It's just a bunch of scattered dots all around, and there's really no good way to draw a line through it. If there's no good way, then it's none. Okay, what would an exponential set of data look like? Something that does this. Now, the dots may not be perfect, but it has a general curve, okay? Linear, we've seen a lot of. Quadratic would be something like that. Now, that looks similar to this one to some people, but notice that if I go to draw my curve through it, it fits all those points really well. Whereas if I try to draw a curve through this one, I get some of them, but I've got so many outlying points that are nowhere near my parabola. It would not be a very good model. Number 14, which graph models this equation? Okay, easiest way to do this, put it into y equals mx plus b form, our slope-intercept form, and then check it in the calculator. Well, first things first, subtract 2x from both sides. Divide by 3. This 3 goes to both pieces, so it's negative 2/3 x plus 2. I hop over into my calculator, clear out whatever was there. I should have a negative 2/3 x. I believe it was plus 2. Double check that. Yep. Zoom 6 just to start at our standard graph. And that's the one we're looking for. Slightly decreasing and moving through the point of positive 2 for the intercept. That looks like answer A. Again, you can mouse over these and actually zoom in and check them a little bit more carefully. That's the best I can do with this zoomed out like it is and on a flip chart. Next problem, solution set to the system of inequalities is graphed. What is wrong with the graph? Okay, so for us to graph these guys, for us to graph them, we have to solve each of these for y. So I take this first equation, which is 3x minus 2y is less than negative 5. And I solve it for y. Subtract 3x. I get negative 2y is less than negative 3x minus 5. Divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. Y is greater than 3/2 x